All right, so we're in this playlist of maintenance topics, and today's maintenance topic is transmission fluid. So we're talking about automatic transmission fluid called ATF. That references the traditional torque converter automatic transmissions. This is also going to apply to CVTs, the continuously variable transmissions. There's really no difference in the way that fluid is changed, and what we're going to be talking about here would apply to all those types of fluids. So we're going to cover in this video, how often should I change my transmission fluid? What transmission fluid should I use, and how many quarts do I need? How much will it cost me to change my transmission fluid? How do I change my transmission fluid? And what about the transmission filter? All right, so we're going to cover all these topics. So I just want to say that on transmission fluids, it's good to look in your owner's manual. If you don't have an owner's manual, maybe you lost it or you bought a used vehicle, most manufacturers publish their owner's manuals online for free, and a lot of them are searchable, so that's a big help. So I will say that you should refer to your owner's manual, find your manufacturer's recommendation. If the manufacturer of your vehicle recommends something more conservative, meaning more frequent fluid changes or something like that, then what I recommend, by all means, follow their recommendation. I typically don't recommend changing fluids less frequently than what the manufacturer recommends, but I do frequently recommend changing them more than what they will say in a manual or something like that. And it's just based on common sense and considering the cost of a repair of a transmission. So how often should I change my transmission fluid? So manufacturers sometimes say that the transmission fluid is a lifetime fluid. I do not believe that. It might mean the life of the warranty, but I don't really see how you can say that a transmission which has moving metal components and is going to have metal shavings floating around in the fluid. And it's not just metal shavings. I mean, fluid does break down over time. That's why, when you change your transmission fluid, it is a different color than it was when it went in, and it oftentimes stinks. And so it kind of lets you know that's really not possible for it to truly be a lifetime fluid. So I don't believe that. So also, after your engine, the transmission is the next most expensive component that you have in your vehicle. So think about that. As important as oil changes are, and they are the most important thing to take care of your car, next would be your transmission fluid. You don't want to ignore that. It costs thousands of dollars to replace a transmission and can cost thousands to repair one as well. So I recommend changing transmission fluid every 30,000 miles. That's my personal recommendation. It's what I follow on all the vehicles that I take care of, which is my vehicle, my wife's vehicle, 2 of my daughters have vehicles, and I take care of all them. So when I purchase a used vehicle that has more than 30,000 miles on it, and I do not know the maintenance history, I just go ahead and begin with a transmission fluid change and then keep track from that point on and change it every 30 after that. So what transmission fluid should I use, and how many quarts do I need? So again, you can start with your owner's manual. It'll tell you your fluid type. The owner's manual sometimes will tell you your fluid quantity, but what you really want to know, there's 2 quantities, and you're mainly interested in one of them. So sometimes they'll just give you one, and the problem with that is that's how many quarts the entire transmission holds, like when it was new. The problem with that is when you change your transmission fluid, you're just opening up a drain bolt, you're letting fluid flow out, and then you are putting that amount back in, but all of it doesn't come out. So your car may say that your capacity is 7 quarts, but if you go out and buy 7 quarts, you're probably going to use maybe 4 of them, maybe somewhere between 3.5 and 4.5, and you're going to have all these extra quarts left over. And that's because a decent amount of that fluid does stay in your transmission when you change it. So what do you do if you can't find that out? You know, your owner's manual doesn't tell you. Watching YouTube, Googling and looking at forums and things like that, watch other people, and don't just watch one video or read one forum. You want to look into that enough before you do it the first time so that you have a pretty good idea, because you want to have enough on hand to do the change. So the other thing that will help if you're not comfortable finding things in your owner's manual, or you can't find exactly what you want to find out, for transmission fluid in particular, your dealership parts counter can be very helpful. So go into a dealership and just calling them up, give them your VIN, your vehicle identification number. That'll tell them everything they need to know about your vehicle. They'll be able to tell you what store brand of transmission fluid you need. So, whatever brand of car you have, they're going to sell you their brand of transmission fluid, and you're going to know that that's the recommended fluid from your manufacturer. So you're guaranteed that that is going to be safe for your vehicle. So if you're really concerned about it, that's kind of the safe bet. The other thing I found is that dealerships are pretty reasonable on transmission fluid prices. So they're not the cheapest, but they're reasonable. And then also, if you need crush washers for the drain bolt or a crush washer for anything, they're going to know all that. They're going to know all those sizes. You'll pay a little more there. You might pay $1.50 or $2 per washer, whereas you might be able to get that for $1 or less on Amazon. But you don't do this very often. You might spend a couple more bucks at the dealer on that, but it's still going to be reasonable. So for your transmission fluid, your dealership brand is a safe bet. But if you want to look for alternatives, especially if you want to save money, just make sure that any fluid you use meets your manufacturer's recommendations. So for Hondas do have specific fluid for their transmissions that they have developed. If you have a Honda product, I highly recommend sticking with the Honda fluid. So I've dealt with 3 different Honda transmissions. I've dealt with the 6-speed. That's what's in our Pilot. I have the 9-speed, which that's what's in my Ridgeline, and it takes this ATF, automatic transmission fluid dash type 3.1. And then I had a CVT in my Honda CRV, and that is yet a different fluid. I think that was called HCF-2. And I bought all those at the Honda dealership, and I just stuck with that. So when I did my daughter's Mazda CX-5, went to the Mazda parts counter at the Mazda dealer and bought Mazda fluid. Now, the Hyundai fluid for my daughter's Elantra, I did use an aftermarket fluid because doing some research, it didn't seem like the Hyundai Kia fluid was really unique in any way. So for that one, I use the most popular aftermarket fluid for transmissions, and that's a Valvoline MaxLife full synthetic multi-vehicle ATF. That's a long name. Valvoline MaxLife full synthetic multi-vehicle ATF. The reason all that's important, you don't want to accidentally buy motor oil, so you want to say ATF, automatic transmission fluid. So how did I know that that was an okay choice? Well, in the manual, Hyundai states that the ATF must be SP4 or SP4-M. And when you look at the Valvoline MaxLife bottle, it states on the back Hyundai Kia SP4 and SP4M. So it's a match. Reading about forums, watching videos, it's a highly popular choice for Hyundai Kia owners, so I knew it was safe for that. How much will it cost me to change my transmission fluid? Well, the dealership parts counter, you can get a pretty quick price. You can find out how much it's going to cost you to purchase from them based on, their price per quart and how many quarts you need. So if, again, you can learn from watching YouTube videos and other videos if your manual doesn't say, or if the parts counter can't tell you how many quarts do I need. You can ask the parts counter. Let's say that you watch some videos and some videos took 3.5 quarts. Some people said they took 4.5 quarts, and you're like, well, I don't want to be in the middle of a job and be a quart short. So you want to round up, you want to buy 5 quarts. So you could ask them, if I buy 5 quarts and I keep my receipt and I only use 4, can I bring the unopened quart back with my receipt and get my money back? Most any reputable parts counter is going to be fine with that if you have not opened it and if it's within a reasonable amount of time. So you can also get their cost for a crush washer is going to be around $2 or less. So that gives you, this is how much it's going to cost me from the dealer if I buy their stuff to change it myself. You can look into aftermarket alternatives, but do your research and make sure the fluid is compatible with your vehicle. So when making this video, I did some price comparing. The Walmart prices for Valvoline MaxLife full synthetic multi-vehicle ATF are currently, when I'm making this video, $25.92 a gallon. So that's 4 quarts. So that's only $6.88 a quart. That is a very good value. So this fluid does work with most vehicles, and if you are on a tight budget, it will usually be your cheapest option. Even though I believe in you sticking with the Honda fluids for my Honda products, the Valvoline MaxLife bottle has been updated in the last year, and they now claim that they meet all the Honda requirements that I mentioned, the 6-speed, the 9-speed, the CVT. Now they won't say 6-speed, 9-speed, CVT. They'll list the Honda fluid as a match. So they'll say Honda type 3.1, this is for the 9-speed. They'll say Honda, whatever, the HCF-2 for the CVT. So that is a good option if you're trying to save some money. So the purchasing your fluid yourself will typically cost you for your whole change somewhere between $30 and $130, and most vehicles are going to be less than $50. The reason I included the $130 is because of my Ridgeline. This Honda 3.1 fluid is expensive. It's over $30 a quart. Whereas my 6-speed Honda Pilot, it's like $10 a quart or something like that. So it does make a difference. So you can see why some people with a Honda 9-speed want to save some money. But again, you're only doing this every 30,000 miles. So you have to remember that although your manufacturer's fluid will be more expensive than an aftermarket, you're only doing this once every 30,000 miles. So for most people, that's only one time every 2 years. How do I change my transmission fluid? Well, follow your manufacturer's recommendation and understand that the same technique may not apply to all vehicles. So I'm going to give you a couple of general methods, okay? But you're going to want to look at your manual. You're going to want to watch some YouTube videos. You're going to want to do a little research, but I'm going to give you the basic steps that have worked for all the vehicles that I've used. This is going to be the same technique for a traditional torque converter automatic transmission and a CVT, continuously variable transmission. There's really no difference when it comes to changing the fluid, other than what type of fluid they might take in some cases. So for our video purposes, this red Solo cup is going to represent our transmission, okay? So if this is our, I shouldn't say our transmission entirely, but our pan where our transmission fluid is sitting. So, you know, you'd have on the bottom, you'd have like a drain bolt on the bottom that you could take out to drain fluid. You'd have a spot at the top, which would also be either a dipstick where you would put a transmission funnel in the top to put fluid in, and then some transmissions have a bolt in the side of this container, and that's called a check bolt. So the drain bolt is on the bottom because that's where you're draining. Your fill bolt or your fill plug is your fill hole, we'll call it, is on the top because sometimes it's a bolt, sometimes it's a little thing you pull out. So we'll just call it a fill hole at the top. And then a check bolt in the side, which all of them don't have. Some of them do, some of them don't. So that's generally going to be what your transmission is like, and you're basically trying to figure out, how do I get the fluid out of here and put fluid back in and know that I put in the right amount. Because transmission fluid, transmissions used to have a dipstick just like oil does, but nowadays most transmissions don't. Most transmissions do not have a dipstick anymore, so it can be a little bit challenging, and some people are afraid to change their transmission fluid because of that, but you don't need to be. So first alternative I'm going to show you is if you do have a check bolt in the side of your transmission. I'm going to post these steps in the video description, and again, these are just recommendations you need to clarify for your vehicle, but this is the general idea. So you warm up your vehicle by driving for a few minutes. All right, so after I warm the vehicle up by driving for a few minutes, I'll want to jack up the vehicle on all 4 jack stands, and I want the vehicle to look as level as possible. Also, never trust your life to just one thing like the jack stand. So you're going to want a duplicate method of holding your car up, like still having a floor jack under the front and the back, where the floor jack is right there to hold the car up if one of the jack stands would fail. That's what I do, is I have 4 jack stands and 2 floor jacks under my cars when I'm working on them. But just do something to protect your life, so you'll be safe working on your vehicle. So then you're going to remove the fill plug or the fill bolt, which is the one on the, fill one is on the top. So you're going to want to make sure you can get that off, because you're going to have to put fluid back in. So you want to be able to identify your fill plug or your fill bolt on the top of your transmission. And for most vehicles, it's going to be way down in there, so you're going to access that typically from the top. There are a few vehicles where you get under it and you reach up and grab it, but most of them, obviously your vehicle's off, but most of them you're going to have to reach your hand down in there quite a bit to grab that. And whether it be like a dipstick kind of thing, or whether it be a ratchet with a socket extension or something to get a bolt loosened. So you're going to remove that. And then you remove the drain bolt, which would be the one on the bottom. And when you do that, fluids are going to start pouring out. So you're going to want a pan in there to catch your fluid. A lot of drain bolts have a magnet on them. So when you unthread the bolt, it might be extra long because there's a magnet. And you're going to want a rag that you're going to dispose of, because you're going to take that bolt and wipe it on that rag, and you're going to see all these shiny shavings. They're little metal shavings, and you're going to want that magnet to be totally clean. Then you're going to, once you do that and you clean that magnet off, you're going to want to have a new crush washer ready. And once that fluid is drained, you're going to put your drain bolt back in the bottom, and you're going to torque it down to the manufacturer's torque specification found in your owner's manual or online. Now, in this case, we said you had a check bolt in the side, so you're going to remove that check bolt from the side of your transmission. So at this point, you've drained all the fluid, you've put the bolt back in the bottom, so it's not going to fall out the bottom, and you've removed your check bolt in the side of your transmission fluid. I'll have links in the video description to this. This is a very nice transmission fluid funnel. It's all steel, and this spout is bendable, and this goes right in that transmission fill spot and really fits securely in there, so you won't spill anything. So you'll get that set up where you can add your fluid. And so with the fill bolt method, the advantage of that is you can get your level very accurate. So now you're gonna take your transmission fluid. Let's see here. I'll move this over to here. You're gonna pour it into your funnel. So under my car on the floor, I'm gonna have, you know, a pan to catch everything, and then I'm gonna start pouring my fluid in, and then I'm gonna listen, because when it gets to a certain point, it's gonna start draining out that fill bolt. And so it's good at this point to have somebody looking under the car so they can kind of, whoa, there it is. You see it? It's coming out the fill bolt in my solo cup. So what that does is it says, okay, we're guaranteeing you're not going to overfill it, because when it gets to that point, it's going to come out the side. That's what a check bolt does. So now once you've done that, you're going to get you're going to take your fill bolt with your new crush washer, and you're going to thread it back into that hole, but you're not going to tighten it with a wrench. You're just going to use your fingers, and you're going to hand tighten it, and it's going to stop all that from leaking. Then you're going to get into your car. Remember, it's up on jack stands, so you need to be careful, need to have it very secure. And you're going to start the vehicle. And you're going to, with your foot on the brake the whole time, you're going to shift your gears from park and wait like 3 seconds in between every shift. You go into reverse, go into neutral, go into drive. If you have a low gear, you can go into low, and go back into drive, back into neutral, reverse, go back into park. Then you're going to shut the vehicle off. Then you're going to come back around. You're going to climb back under the car, and you're going to take that fill bolt out. Okay, you're going to undo that check bolt, the check bolt inside. You're going to take it out again. Then you're going to have your helper be watching under the car, watching for that drip. You can go back to your transmission fluid at the top, because it will have went down a little bit, and you're going to start pouring fluid back in. Oh, it's coming out again. And then you get under that car, and you're going to put your check bolt back in the side, and you're going to torque it down to your manufacturer's recommendations. So now you're absolutely guaranteed that you have the right amount of fluid in that transmission. Then you're going to come back to the top, you're going to put your fill plug or your fill bolt back in place, and you are finished. Now, it's a really good idea, if you're going to go through that and you're really going to take all those steps, keep track of how much fluid you added in, and have somebody watching so you're not wasting a bunch of fluid, and write down the exact number of quarts you estimate actually went into your transmission, minus how much you spilled. And then in future changes, there's really no need to go through all those steps, because you know it's going to always be the same. So in the future, you could forget the check bolt part, you could forget the starting of the car, and you could just drain all your fluid. You could put the drain bolt back in, and you could pour in that amount next time and put your fill bolt back on, and you'd be done, because you would already know how much all that was going to lead to. So that's kind of the second alternative, is whatever pan that you're going to use to catch the fluid, you want it to be big enough so nothing spills, and you want it to be completely empty, and you want to have a way to measure what comes out and then put that same exact amount back in. So that method would be warm up your vehicle by driving for a few minutes, jack up on 4 jack stands and keep it level. Have that extra safety in place for making sure your vehicle doesn't fall. You remove the fill plug at the top. You remove the drain bolt from the bottom and allow all the fluid to drain. If it has a magnet, you're going to wipe the magnet clean. And remember, you have to get an accurate measurement of how much fluid comes out. So you want to use an empty container, large enough so no fluid will spill. There are many ways to measure the fluid. One way would be to have a container, and then once all the fluid drains into it, you could take a permanent marker, and on the outside of that container you could mark how much fluid there was, like put a mark at the top of the fluid. That's one easy way where you could use almost any container. And then you would empty that container into something you're going to take to recycle, and you would take that container and you'd wipe it clean because it had dirty fluid in it. But you still got your mark on the outside of the level that it had, and so you could wipe it really clean with a rag. Then you could fill that container with your new fluid up to that mark, and then pour it through your funnel, or use you at that point transfer it to a pitcher or something that you could pour into a funnel back into your fill bolt, and put your fill bolt back in, and you're done. It really is that simple. There are other ways you could think of to do that, where you could measure it. You could drain it all into here. You could pour it all into these pitchers and measure how much it was. Then you could clean out all of the containers you use with old fluid, put the same amount back in. So that's how you do that. And I'm going to post those instructions in the description. And remember, those are kind of generic and basic. Your vehicle might have something different, but all the ones I've ever done, that's basically your options. What about the transmission filter? So I'm going to share quite a bit of information with you about this, but I just want to set your mind at ease with this. I get a ton of questions on my YouTube channel about transmission filters. In most cases, you will not need to change your transmission filter. Most people that buy a car never change a transmission filter for the life that they own it and never have an issue. So that should set your mind at ease right away. So do some research on your vehicle to find out if it has a transmission filter, or what we would call a serviceable filter. Meaning, can I even service this filter if it has one? And we're going to talk more about that. And if the manufacturer recommends changing it. So some Hondas have filters in various places, but Honda typically does not recommend ever messing with them. They usually do not recommend changing them. So you can follow your manufacturer's recommendations, but I'm going to elaborate on some of the options you have. Some vehicles have an inline filter, where the filter, where your transmission fluid is flowing through a hose. Like, say it's coming in this way through a hose, and then there'll be a filter here, and then on the other side of the filter the hose continues. So all that fluid that's flowing through goes through a filter. That would be an inline filter. These are the easiest to change. I have one video on my channel in my daughter's 2008 Honda CR-V playlist. If you want to see that video, that's been a very popular video where I did change that filter because we bought it and it had 100,000 miles on it, and I wanted to change it. If you had a filter like that, even though the manufacturer may never recommend to change it, if it's easy to get to, I think that filter was only like $12 or something, I would change it every 90,000 miles just because of how it could extend the life of my transmission, and it was easy to change and it was cheap. Some vehicles have a filter inside the transmission pan that can be accessed if you go through the trouble of dropping the pan during your transmission fluid change. Warning, this is a lot of work. Something you don't want to do unless you have a reason to believe that filter needs changed. I do have a video on my channel where I do this change on my daughter's Mazda CX-5. The reason I did it was because we purchased a vehicle with more than 100,000 miles. We didn't know how often or even if the transmission fluid had ever been changed. So I just felt like it was worth it to go ahead and go through that trouble for that. At most, I would change this type every 90,000 miles. But if I bought a car that had a transmission filter like that was hard to get to, and I took care of my vehicle and changed it every 30,000 miles, the fluid, I don't think I would ever change that filter. I think I would trust that it was going to stay clean if I'm changing my fluid and things of that nature, because it was pretty involved. You can look at the video. You drop the pan, you had to clean off all the surfaces, you had to put a new seal, a gasket, RTV gasket, and it took a couple of days to do it, because you had to let that sit for like 24 hours and torque the bolts and sequence and all that, and it worked. I didn't have any leaks, haven't had any problems. I'm glad I did it. It gives us peace of mind, but it's a lot of work and may not have been necessary. Some vehicles have a filter that would be called unserviceable. So in some cases, they may refer to one that was inside the pan, like I just mentioned. Some people may say that's unserviceable just because it's hard to get to. But really, that's not unserviceable. It's just more of a difficult service level. There are some that really are unserviceable. So my daughter's Hyundai Elantra is one of those. So I did some research on that. It is some vehicles are up inside the transmission where you drop the pan, then you have like a valve body, and you would have to take that apart. Most people would not be comfortable doing that, and it might be behind that. But at least you could still get to it. I think there's some old Nissans that have that, V6 Nissans, and some, but my daughter's Hyundai is even more than that. I was watching a video where somebody took apart the transmission, they dropped the valve body, and they pointed to where the transmission filter was, but they still couldn't get to it, not even with specialty tools. And they said to get to it, you would literally have to disassemble the entire transmission. That is unserviceable. So if it's made like that, clearly you would never change that filter. So in most cases, you will not need to change your transmission filter. The best thing is to research your vehicle and follow the manufacturer's recommendations. So I'll put a link to this funnel, which is awesome for transmission fluid changes. I'll put that in the video description. And thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful. Check out the playlist in the video description I'll put in there of this maintenance topic series where we talk about things like this. Thank you for watching.